The briefing room went silent when I walked in. I carried a standard tactical pack and wore marine combat utilities, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. The 8 Navy SEALs around the situation map barely glanced my way. I could read their assumptions instantly. Intel specialist, maybe communications support, definitely not a shooter. That suited me just fine. Lieutenant Commander Reese Maddox stood at the head of the table satellite imagery, spread before him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. At 38, he carried himself with the calm authority of someone who had run these missions dozens of times. He was the only one in this room who knew what I actually did. We'd had a conversation 3 days ago that consisted of 2 sentences. "They don't know," he'd said. "That's intentional, sir," I'd replied. The team's primary sniper moved to the front. Petty Officer First Class Colt Brennan, 32 years old, 3 deployments, 47 confirmed kills. His call sign was Eagle Eye Earned Through Precision, that had kept this team alive in some of the worst places on Earth. He pointed to a ridgeline on the satellite image with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "That's my position," Brennan said. 800 meters clear line of sight, minimal wind interference at that hour. I watched him trace the shot mentally. He was good, very good. Just not as good as he'd need to be if this went sideways. Hayes Drummond, the team's breacher, gestured toward an empty seat near the communications gear. At 29, with a thick beard and friendly eyes, he was the kind of operator who looked out for everyone. I nodded my thanks, but remained standing against the back wall. The gesture was noted and quickly forgotten. Perfect. The target compound sat in a valley 12 kilometers from the Pakistani border. High-value individual confirmed present. Narrow window for extraction. Standard direct action mission with one critical requirement: precision overwatch from elevated positions. The enemy had learned to expect American raiders. They would be ready. Maddox traced the infiltration route with a laser pointer, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had run these missions dozens of times. The team would insert via helicopter at a landing zone 3 clicks north, move through mountainous terrain under darkness, establish overwatch positions before dawn, neutralize the target during a scheduled meeting at 0600. Brennan leaned forward to study the topography. His finger moved across the terrain model someone had constructed on a side table, tracing probable wind patterns and calculating range estimates with the casual fluency of a master craftsman discussing his trade. I stepped slightly closer. The movement was subtle enough that only Maddox noticed. The lieutenant commander caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. I settled back against the wall. Wyatt Kane, the youngest member of the team at 26, asked about secondary exfiltration routes if the primary was compromised. Maddox outlined the contingencies, while I remained motionless. My breathing controlled my posture, relaxed but centered. Anyone with training in body language might have recognized the stillness of someone comfortable with violence. But these men were focused on the mission, not on analyzing the woman they assumed was there to carry extra batteries and relay messages. "Before we continue," Maddox said, shifting his attention briefly to the rest of the team, "I want to make sure everyone understands the support element. Callahan is attached to this operation under JSOC directive. Her presence is need to know, her background is classified, and her role will be clarified as necessary." A few SEALs exchanged glances. Classified support usually meant intelligence analysts or specialized technical personnel. My slight build and quiet demeanor did nothing to challenge that assumption. I offered no explanation, and Maddox provided none. The briefing continued. Exfiltration timing, air support windows, rules of engagement, medical contingencies. Each SEAL absorbed the information with professional focus, their questions precise and tactical. I listened without interrupting, my eyes moving from the map to the faces around me, cataloging everything. "Final equipment check is at 2200, Maddox announced. "Wheels up at 2330. We insert at 0100 local time." "Any questions?" Drummond raised a hand. "Does Callahan need any special accommodation for gear or positioning during insert?" The question was asked without condescension, purely practical. I spoke for the first time since entering the room. "Standard combat load. I'll position wherever the team needs me." My accent was neutral American. my tone professional. Nothing remarkable, nothing that suggested anything beyond basic military competence. Drummond nodded and returned his attention to the map. The briefing broke up 20 minutes later. SEALs filed out discussing sectors and timing their camaraderie, evident in the shorthand of men who had trained together for years. I gathered my pack and turned toward the door. Maddox called my name. I paused. When the room was empty, the lieutenant commander crossed to where I stood. His voice dropped to a tone meant only for me. "They don't know," he said. My expression remained neutral. "That's intentional, sir." Maddox studied me for a moment. In 3 years of working with Joint Special Operations Command, he had seen my classified file exactly once. The details were limited, but the summary was clear. Marine Scout Sniper School honor graduate, advanced special operations training, multiple deployments to classified theaters, operational designation that made my assignment to his team both logical and surprising. If Brennan goes down, Maddox said, "We need you ready." I met his eyes without hesitation. "I'm always ready, sir." The confidence in my voice was not arrogance. It was the simple statement of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of and felt no need to prove it before the moment required. Maddox recognized that quality because he had built his career on the same foundation. "Before you arrived, did anyone in your command ask questions about your role here?" "They were told, 'I'm augmenting your intelligence package,'" I replied. Nobody questioned it. Maddox almost smiled. The assumption had worked perfectly. A female Marine attached to a SEAL team would naturally be slotted into support categories by default, not through malice or even conscious sexism, but through the simple pattern recognition that guided quick assessments in high-speed operations. I had not fought the assumption because fighting it would have drawn attention I did not want. "Get some rest," Maddox said. "Tomorrow might get complicated." I nodded and left the briefing room. The hallway outside was empty fluorescent lights humming overhead in the deployed base that served as staging for a dozen teams running missions across the region. I walked with the easy gait of someone comfortable in combat boots, my pack riding naturally on shoulders that had carried such loads across mountains and deserts for years. In my assigned quarters, I laid out my equipment with methodical precision. Body armor ammunition pouches, medical kit communications gear, and wrapped in a weatherproof case at the bottom of my pack, the tool that defined my actual purpose on this mission. The rifle was a custom-built precision weapon chambered in .308 Winchester, topped with optics that cost more than most cars. I assembled it without looking, my hands moving through the familiar ritual of checking every component: bolt, trigger, assembly, scope, mounts. Every piece had been zeroed to my exact specifications, every adjustment calibrated through thousands of rounds, fired in conditions ranging from Arctic cold to desert heat. I did not think about the SEALs and their assumptions. That would resolve itself when circumstances demanded. Instead, I thought about wind patterns at dawn in mountainous terrain, about the way temperature shifts affected ballistics at extended range, about the 100 variables that separated good shots from perfect shots. I had learned my craft from instructors who believed that sniping was not about pulling triggers, but about controlling chaos through perfect preparation. I had learned that the weapon was only as good as the mind behind it. And I had learned that reputation meant nothing compared to results. My call sign was known in certain circles, spoken with the kind of respect reserved for operators who delivered when everything else failed. But tomorrow, the SEALs would learn it for the first time. And they would learn it because someone was about to go down and someone else was about to step up in ways none of them expected. I finished my equipment check and sat on the rack rifle case across my knees. Outside, the base hummed with activity. Helicopters spooled up for other missions. Trucks moved supplies. Young Marines and soldiers went about the business of supporting the war machine that never slept. I closed my eyes and visualized the terrain, the ridgeline, the compound, the distances and angles. In my mind, I ran through the shots Brennan would take, then through the shots I might need to take if his position was compromised. I thought through contingencies and backup plans, building the mental architecture that would support split-second decisions when bullets started flying. Nobody knew that I had spent 6 months in a classified role supporting Delta Force operations. Nobody knew about the nights I had held impossible angles while assault teams moved through structures below. Nobody knew that my longest confirmed kill was just over 1,400 meters a shot, taken in conditions that should have made success impossible. Tomorrow, they would learn part of that truth. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough to understand that the woman they had dismissed as support staff was something else entirely. I opened my eyes and began my pre-mission ritual, the same sequence I had followed before every operation since my first combat deployment. Equipment staged, mental visualization complete. Now came the hardest part. Waiting for tomorrow to arrive and prove once again that underestimation was a gift I had learned to accept with quiet grace. The armory at 2200 was controlled chaos. 8 SEALs moved through weapons checks with the efficiency of men who could field strip their rifles blindfolded. I arrived early and claimed a corner workstation, laying out my gear in precise rows that spoke to training most of these operators would never see. Brennan was already there, his sniper rifle partially disassembled on a mat. He glanced up when I set down my pack, offering a brief nod that acknowledged my presence without particular interest. I returned the gesture and began my own inspection routine. The rifle case opened with quiet clicks. I lifted the weapon free and began function checks that had become muscle memory, bolt cycling trigger reset scope adjustments. My movements were economical practiced, but I kept the work subtle. Just another support person checking equipment. Nothing to see here. Drummond wandered over his own carbine slung across his chest. He watched me work for a moment before speaking. "You handle that pretty well," he observed. I did not look up from examining my scope rings. Marine Corps qualification standards. Everyone learns basic marksmanship. It was true, but incomplete, like saying a surgeon learned basic first aid. Drummond accepted the answer at face value and moved on to harass Brennan about some previous mission that had become team legend. The banter filled the armory with the easy profanity and dark humor that soldiers used to process the violence they inflicted and endured. I listened while working, learning the team dynamics through their jokes. Who trusted whom? Who had saved whose life? Who still owed money from a card game in Bagram? Brennan finished his inspection and began reassembly. His hands moved with the confidence of thousands of repetitions, each component sliding into place with practiced certainty. I watched peripherally, noting his technique, comparing it to my own training. Different schools taught different methods, but the fundamentals remained constant. Kane approached my workstation carrying extra loaded magazines. He set them down near my pack. "Thought you might need these," Kane said. "Standard loadout if things get spicy." I looked at the magazines, then at Kane. His expression was genuinely helpful, no condescension. I recognized the impulse. He was trying to take care of a team member he assumed might not be fully prepared for combat. "Thank you," I said. "That's thoughtful." Kane smiled and returned to his own preparations. I added the magazines to my kit. The ammunition was 5.56 for standard carbines, useless for my actual weapon, but I accepted it gracefully. When a mission went sideways, if it went sideways, I would have more than enough of the right caliber already loaded. Maddox entered the armory at 2020. His presence shifted the atmosphere from casual to focused. The lieutenant commander moved between workstations, checking preparations with questions that revealed his attention to detail. He spent 5 minutes with Brennan discussing environmental factors and range cards. When Maddox reached me, he kept his voice neutral. "Equipment satisfactory." "Sergeant," I met his eyes briefly. "Yes, sir. Ready for tasking." The exchange was professional and unremarkable, but Maddox held my gaze for half a second longer than necessary. The silent communication was clear. I understood. He understood. Nobody else needed to understand yet. The team moved to final staging at 2300. Body armor was donned and adjusted. Helmet-mounted night vision was tested. Communications gear went through radio checks that filled the air with static and call signs. I integrated myself into the flow without drawing attention, just another person preparing for insertion. The helicopter crouched on the tarmac like a predator, waiting to launch its rotors, beginning their slow turn as we approached. Each man found his assigned position with choreographed precision. I was directed to a seat near the rear ramp positioned between medical supplies and communications equipment. The placement was logical for support personnel. I strapped in and settled my pack between my boots. The rifle case was secured against my leg, its weight familiar and reassuring. Around me, SEALs made final adjustments and checked their neighbors. The camaraderie was evident in touches to shoulders, nods of readiness, the unspoken language of men about to step into danger together. Brennan sat opposite me, his own rifle across his knees. He caught my eye and raised his voice over the increasing rotor noise. First combat deployment, I considered my answer. Technically, no. Actually, no. But the truth was complicated and unnecessary. I shook my head. Been forward before. Different capacity. Brennan accepted this and returned his attention to his weapon. The conversation ended there, swallowed by the roar of turbines spooling to full power. I watched the SEAL sniper through my peripheral vision, noting how he held his rifle, how his breathing remained steady despite the approaching insertion. Professional competence. Recognizing professional competence, even if only one of them knew it. The helicopter lifted with the stomach-dropping sensation of controlled falling upward. Through the open ramp base, lights fell away into darkness. The pilot banked hard and the valley opened below us, invisible except where moonlight caught on streams and rock faces. I felt the familiar pre-mission clarity settling over my thoughts. Fear became focus. Uncertainty became tactical planning. The helicopter was just transport. The mission was just another problem to solve through preparation and execution. I had done this before in places these SEALs would never know about, and I would do it again after they returned to their teams and forgot the quiet Marine who had tagged along. 30 minutes into the flight, Drummond leaned across the cabin and tapped my boot. When he had my attention, he pointed to my pack and made a questioning gesture about weight. I gave a thumbs up. Everything secure, everything manageable. What Drummond could not know was that I had carried heavier loads across worse terrain. I had moved through mountains in Afghanistan where the altitude made every breath a battle. I had low-crawled through Iraqi deserts where the heat turned body armor into an oven. The pack I carried tonight was almost comfortable by comparison. Kane caught my eye and gave an encouraging nod. These men were genuinely trying to help someone they believed might struggle with the physical demands ahead. I appreciated the intent even as I recognized the irony. In 6 hours, their perspective would shift dramatically, but for now, I accepted their concern with quiet gratitude. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone. Maddox held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. The team shifted from relaxed to ready. Weapons coming up, night vision being activated. I pulled my own night vision into place and the world transformed into green-lit clarity. Brennan moved to the edge of the ramp, his rifle ready. 2 other SEALs took positions beside him, prepared to provide immediate security on landing. I remained in my seat until directed otherwise, playing my assigned role perfectly. The skids touched earth with barely a bump. The SEALs flowed out in practiced sequence, establishing a perimeter, while the helicopter crew kept engines running for quick departure. I exited last, moving to my assigned position in the formation without needing direction. The helicopter lifted immediately, its noise fading into the distance until only mountain silence remained. We held security for 60 seconds, listening for any indication we had been detected. Nothing but wind and the distant sound of water over rocks. Maddox hand-signaled the movement order. The SEALs began their patrol toward the target area, night vision turning the darkness into navigable terrain. I fell into the formation, where indicated maintaining proper spacing and tactical awareness. We moved through the mountains like ghosts, each footfall placed with care to minimize noise. I matched their pace easily, my breathing controlled despite the elevation and the weight I carried. The SEALs demonstrated the skills that made them elite, but I had trained in the same mountains under instructors who believed movement discipline was the difference between mission success and body bags. 2 hours into the patrol, we reached the first checkpoint. Maddox called a brief halt for hydration and navigation confirmation. I took the opportunity to adjust my pack straps, a movement that brought Brennan's attention. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Good to go." Brennan studied me for a moment in the green glow of night vision. Something in my posture or my breathing pattern registered as unexpected. But before he could pursue the thought, Maddox signaled movement resumption. The patrol continued. I knew we were approaching the ridgeline where Brennan would establish his sniper position. My own role remained undefined in the minds of most team members. Support backup communications, maybe medical assistance if someone got hit. I let them maintain those assumptions. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. It always did. For now, I simply moved through the darkness with 8 Navy SEALs who had no idea that the most lethal person on this mission was the quiet woman they had positioned near the medical supplies. The ridgeline appeared through the darkness like a jagged spine cutting across the valley. Brennan moved forward with Maddox to scout the primary sniper position, while the rest of us established a defensive perimeter. I remained with the main element, my position assigned, near a cluster of rocks that provided cover and concealment. I used the pause to study the terrain through my night vision. The target compound sat 800 meters downslope, exactly as the briefing had indicated. Stone walls surrounded a central courtyard where intelligence suggested the high-value target would meet his associates at dawn. Guard towers at 2 corners, single vehicle gate on the north side. Predictable defenses for someone who believed his remote location provided security. Brennan returned 15 minutes later and set up his position with methodical care. He cleared rocks that might interfere with his shooting platform, arranged his gear for quick access, and settled into a prone position that would allow him to remain comfortable for hours. I watched the process with professional interest, noting techniques that matched my own training and small variations that reflected his personal experience. Drummond moved past me to deliver extra ammunition to Brennan. He paused beside me on the return trip. "You'll be here if we need communications relay," Drummond said quietly. "Stay low and stay quiet. This position might take indirect fire if things go bad." I acknowledged the warning with a nod. Drummond meant well. He was trying to prepare someone he believed might not fully grasp the danger of being on a ridgeline when the enemy started shooting back. I appreciated his concern even as I calculated fields of fire and covered positions with the automatic assessment of someone who had survived situations far worse than this. The team settled into pre-dawn stillness. SEALs occupied positions that provided overlapping fields of fire while remaining concealed from the compound below. Maddox established the command position near Brennan, close enough to coordinate but far enough to avoid clustering. I remained where positioned, sitting with my back against a boulder that provided protection from below. I opened my pack with careful silence and extracted the items I would need when circumstances changed. The rifle case came out first, placed beside me, with the opening facing away from curious eyes. Extra magazines went within easy reach. Rangefinder, Kestrel weather meter, the tools of precision shooting arranged in the configuration I had used on 3 continents. Nobody was watching. They were focused on the compound, on their sectors of responsibility, on the mission that was about to unfold. I used their distraction to prepare for the role I knew was coming. Not hoped, not suspected, knew. Because Maddox had read the same intelligence reports I had read, and those reports indicated enemy counter-sniper capability in this region. The sky began its slow transition from black to deep blue. Stars faded incrementally as the horizon prepared for sunrise. In the compound below, lights appeared in windows. Movement began. Guards changing shifts. Someone starting a cooking fire. The mundane routine of a place that did not yet know death was watching from above. Brennan made minute adjustments to his scope. His breathing had settled into the shallow rhythm snipers use to minimize movement. I recognized the pattern because I employed the same technique. Slow the heart rate, control the breath, become part of the landscape rather than a person occupying it. Maddox keyed his radio with a click. All positions reported ready. The mission timeline was entering its critical phase. Within the next hour, the target would appear for his meeting, and Brennan would take the shot that justified this entire operation. I opened my rifle case with movements so subtle they produced no sound. The weapon emerged in pieces that I assembled by touch rather than sight. Stock attached, optic-mounted bolt inserted and cycled to verify function. The familiar weight settled into my hands like an extension of my own body. I kept the rifle low below the sight line of the SEALs around me. This was preparation, not presumption. If Brennan completed his mission successfully, my weapon would return to its case unused, and nobody would question why the support Marine had brought precision shooting equipment. If Brennan went down, questions would become irrelevant, because mission success would demand immediate action. The compound grew clearer as dawn approached. I could make out details now without night vision. The guard towers held 2 men each, both carrying AK pattern rifles, with casual familiarity. A technical vehicle sat near the gate, its mounted machine gun unmanned but accessible. The central building showed signs of recent reinforcement. Someone had added sandbags and improved the firing positions. Brennan noted the same details through his scope. He whispered observations to Maddox, who marked them on his tactical map. The intelligence had been accurate but incomplete. The target had upgraded his security since the last satellite pass. That complicated things, but did not fundamentally change the mission parameters. Movement in the compound drew everyone's attention. A convoy of 3 vehicles approached from the south dust trails, visible in the growing light. They entered through the main gate and disgorged passengers who moved with military bearing. Not the target yet, but associates arriving for the meeting. I counted 8 new combatants, all armed, all moving with tactical awareness that suggested training beyond basic militia level. I filed the information away and continued my own preparation. My shooting position was not ideal from this angle. If I needed to engage, I would have to move 12 meters to my left, where a natural depression provided better sight lines. Brennan shifted slightly, adjusting for the new positions of guards and associates. His shot angle remained clear, but the margin for error had decreased. More people in the compound meant more eyes potentially looking outward at the wrong moment. The sun broke the horizon with sudden brilliance that transformed the valley. Brennan flipped his scope to daylight settings. Maddox scanned the compound through binoculars, searching for the specific face we had been sent to find. The SEALs maintained their positions with the patience of men who understood that rushed operations produced casualties. I felt the familiar pre-engagement clarity settling over my thoughts. Time seemed to slow and sharpen simultaneously. I was aware of wind speed, temperature, the angle of sunlight, the distance to targets both seen and anticipated. My mind ran calculations, automatically building a tactical picture that would support split-second decisions if required. A black SUV emerged from the main building. The doors opened and 3 men stepped out. Maddox stiffened slightly. Brennan adjusted his scope fractionally. The target had appeared. I could see him even without optics. Medium height, gray beard, moving with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. He wore traditional clothing, but carried himself like a man accustomed to giving orders that resulted in death. Intelligence photos matched the figure crossing the courtyard. Brennan began his breathing cycle finger, moving to the trigger final calculations being processed. The shot was perhaps 90 seconds away. Then everything changed. The crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley, but it did not come from Brennan's position. It came from a hillside 700 meters to the east. The sound was followed immediately by the wet impact of a bullet striking flesh. Brennan jerked backward, his shoulder erupting in blood. He collapsed behind his rifle, gasping in shock and pain. The enemy had a sniper, and that sniper had just taken out the primary American shooter before the mission could begin. Maddox was moving before Brennan hit the ground, dragging the wounded SEAL away from the exposed position. Drummond and Kane rushed forward to provide security while chaos erupted in the compound below. Guards scattered for cover. The target disappeared back into the building. The carefully planned operation was disintegrating. I was already moving, not toward Brennan and the sudden medical crisis, not toward cover from the enemy sniper who had just demonstrated lethal competence. I moved left toward the depression I had identified earlier, my rifle coming up as I dropped into a shooting position that gave me sight lines to both the compound and the hillside where the enemy shooter had fired. Maddox's voice cut through the chaos on the radio, sharp and commanding. "Iron Wolf sniper, take point." The words seemed to freeze the SEALs in place. Heads turned, eyes found me now, fully settled into a prone shooting position, with a rifle none of them had seen me carrying. The quiet support Marine had transformed into something else entirely, and the call sign Maddox had just used made several team members exchange glances of sudden comprehension. My voice came back calm and professional, as if taking over primary sniper duties during an active engagement was simply another task to complete. Iron Wolf, moving to primary position. Acquiring targets now. My scope found the enemy hillside first. Muzzle flash signature still fading. Distance 730 meters. Wind 3 knots from the west. Temperature rising. I made microscopic adjustments and waited for the enemy sniper to make his inevitable mistake. In the compound, the target was being rushed toward an armored vehicle. Guards provided covering fire toward our position, even though they had no clear targets. Bullets impacted rocks around the SEAL perimeter. Kane returned fire with controlled bursts, but I ignored all of it. My world had narrowed to the scope picture and the enemy sniper who thought he had won this engagement. I controlled my breathing, slowed my heart rate, became absolutely still. The enemy shooter shifted position, probably preparing for a follow-up shot. The movement was minimal, but enough. I saw the outline, calculated, compensated, squeezed. My rifle spoke once. The sound was sharp and final. 730 meters away, the enemy sniper dropped from sight. I watched through my scope as the figure collapsed behind the ridgeline. The threat was neutralized, but there was no time to confirm the kill. The compound below had erupted into coordinated defensive action that suggested these were not the amateur fighters intelligence had predicted. I shifted my aim point to the compound. Guards were moving with tactical discipline, establishing overlapping fields of fire, and using cover effectively. The target had disappeared into the armored vehicle, which was now maneuvering toward the gate. I had perhaps 20 seconds before he escaped. The vehicle presented a problem. Armored glass reinforced body panels. A direct shot through the windshield might penetrate, but the angle was poor and the target was not visible. I scanned for alternatives, my mind processing options with mechanical efficiency. There. The driver's window was partially open. Not much, maybe 4 inches, but enough. The geometry was difficult. I would need to thread the shot through that narrow gap at an angle that allowed the bullet to continue into the passenger compartment where the target sat. I made rapid calculations. 812 meters to the vehicle. Wind had shifted to 4 knots. Temperature climbing as the sun rose. The vehicle was moving at approximately 15 kilometers per hour. I had one chance. My breathing slowed to almost nothing. The crosshair settled 6 inches ahead of the driver's window, compensating for vehicle movement and bullet flight time. The world reduced to that single point of focus. I pressed the trigger with steady pressure. The rifle recoiled. The bullet flew. Time seemed to suspend as the round crossed the valley. I was already cycling the bolt, chambering a fresh round, maintaining sight picture. 800 meters at 3,000 feet per second meant roughly 1 second of flight time, plus the margin for calculation errors and environmental factors. The vehicle's front window exploded. The driver slumped forward. The SUV swerved violently and crashed into a compound wall. I shifted my aim to the passenger door that was now forced open by someone trying to escape the crashed vehicle. A figure emerged, stumbling. Gray beard, traditional clothing. The target. My second shot took him center mass before his feet fully cleared the vehicle. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Mission accomplished. But the compound was not finished fighting. Behind me, Maddox was coordinating the chaos. Brennan was being treated by Kane, who had medical training. Drummond and 2 other SEALs were laying down suppressing fire toward guard positions that had started shooting at our location. The team was pinned down by enemy fire that was becoming increasingly accurate. I ignored the noise and confusion. My job was not suppression. My job was precision elimination of threats. I methodically began working through the compound defenders. Guard Tower 1 held 2 men with AK rifles. They were firing wildly in the general direction of the SEAL position, but without clear targets. I put a round through the first guard's chest, cycled the bolt. The second guard turned to see his partner fall, and I shot him before he could acquire my position. Tower 1 neutralized, muzzle flash from a window in the main building. Someone with a PKM machine gun was raking the hillside with fire that came close enough to make the SEALs hug the ground. I waited for the shooter to pause to change ammunition belts. When he leaned out to scan for targets, I placed a round through his skull. The machine gun went silent. Movement near the gate. 3 fighters attempting to flank around to a position that would give them enfilade fire on the SEAL perimeter. I tracked the lead man, fired, he fell. The second man froze in confusion, and I dropped him with my next shot. The third man had the good sense to retreat back into cover. Drummond had stopped firing. He was staring at me with an expression that mixed shock with dawning comprehension. Around him, other SEALs were beginning to understand that the quiet Marine they had dismissed as support was systematically dismantling the enemy force with surgical precision. Maddox keyed his radio. "Iron Wolf. What's your ammunition status?" I answered without taking my eye from the scope. 14 rounds remaining, 7 targets identified. Request clearance to continue engagement. Cleared, Hot Maddox replied. We're preparing to move Brennan to the extraction point. Keep them off us. I acknowledged and returned to my work. The compound defenders were becoming disorganized. Their sniper was dead, their leader was dead. The Americans who were supposed to be pinned down were instead executing them one shot at a time from a position they could not locate. A technical vehicle started its engine and began moving toward the gate. If it escaped with reinforcements or heavy weapons, the tactical situation would deteriorate rapidly. I aimed for the driver, but the vehicle was moving erratically, and the shot was partially obscured by the machine gun mounted in the bed. I shifted my aim point. The Technical's front tire exploded as my bullet struck it at the valve stem. The vehicle swerved and crashed into a wall, immobilizing it. The gunner in the back scrambled for the machine gun. I shot him before he could swing the weapon toward the SEAL position. Behind me, the team was moving. 2 SEALs carried Brennan in a hasty litter fashioned from tactical gear. Kane covered their movement while Drummond maintained rear security. They were withdrawing toward the extraction point 3 kilometers north. Maddox moved to my position. He dropped into cover beside me and spoke quietly despite the chaos. "Can you cover our withdrawal?" I fired again. Another guard dropped near the compound gate. "Affirmative. I'll displace in 2 minutes and catch up." Maddox hesitated. Leaving a single operator behind went against every instinct. But he also recognized that I was currently the only thing preventing the enemy from organizing an effective pursuit. He made the tactical decision. 2 minutes, then you move. That's an order. I nodded. Maddox disappeared, moving after his team with the ground-eating pace of a man who had learned to run in combat boots. I returned my attention to the compound. The defenders were trying to organize. I could see someone directing others from the doorway of the main building, probably a lieutenant or advisor who had survived the initial engagement. I put a round through the doorway. The directing stopped. 90 seconds. The SEALs would be clear of immediate danger, but still vulnerable to pursuit. I needed to ensure that pursuit did not materialize. I began engaging anything that looked like leadership or initiative. A man trying to rally others near the gate. Shot. Someone attempting to call on a radio. Shot. 2 fighters preparing to leave the compound in a direction that would intercept the American withdrawal. Both shot in rapid succession. My ammunition was running low. 8 rounds left. The compound had gone quiet. Bodies littered the courtyard. The survivors had taken cover and were staying there, unwilling to expose themselves to the invisible death that had claimed their comrades. I began my own withdrawal. I collected my brass out of habit and professional pride, then broke down my shooting position. The rifle was collapsed and secured. My pack was shouldered. In 30 seconds, I had erased most evidence of my presence. I moved north through terrain that provided cover from the compound. My pace was fast, but controlled eating distance without sacrificing tactical awareness. Behind me, sporadic gunfire suggested the defenders were shooting at shadows. They had lost the will to pursue. 20 minutes of hard movement brought me to a rally point where Drummond was pulling security. His expression when he saw me approach was complex, respect mixed with disbelief, mixed with something that might have been embarrassment at how completely he had misjudged my capabilities. I reached his position and took a knee, breathing heavily but still maintaining weapons discipline. Drummond stared at me for a long moment before speaking. "What the hell are you?" he asked quietly. I checked my rifle and secured my gear before answering. My tone was matter-of-fact, devoid of arrogance or false modesty. Marine Scout Sniper, Advanced Special Operations. My actual assignment was primary overwatch with Brennan as backup. JSOC didn't advertise it because operational security required the enemy to believe we only had one sniper. Drummond processed this information. His next question came slowly. "How many did you drop back there?" I performed the mental arithmetic. The enemy sniper, the driver, the target guards in both towers, the machine gunner, the flanking element, the technical gunner fighters near the gate. The total was 14. 14 confirmed, I replied. Possibly more if the shots through cover connected. Drummond shook his head in amazement. He had been in firefights that consumed hundreds of rounds for a single kill. I had just executed 14 precision shots under combat stress in less than 10 minutes. He started to say something else, but Maddox's voice came over the radio calling for movement to the extraction point. We moved together through the remaining distance. Brennan was conscious and stable, his wounds serious but not life-threatening, thanks to Kane's immediate treatment. The team maintained tactical spacing and weapons discipline, despite their exhaustion and the weight of the casualty they carried. The extraction helicopter appeared on schedule, its silhouette stark against the morning sky. The team loaded quickly, establishing security until everyone was aboard. I was last in taking my assigned seat as the aircraft lifted and banked away from the valley. Brennan, strapped to a litter and dosed with morphine, caught my eye across the cabin. His expression held questions that would wait for later. Around me, SEALs who had started this mission, assuming I was support personnel, were now reassessing everything they thought they knew. Maddox sat beside me as the helicopter gained altitude. He did not say anything immediately. The mission had succeeded despite catastrophic deviation from the plan. The target was eliminated. The team was intact, minus one wounded. By any measure, it was a win. Finally, Maddox leaned close enough to be heard over the engine noise. "Iron Wolf," he said. "Where did that call sign come from?" I looked out at the valley falling away below. Somewhere down there were 14 men who had learned too late that underestimating the quiet woman had been their final mistake. I answered without turning my head. Wolves hunt in silence, and they never miss. The base medical facility smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Brennan was wheeled into surgery while the rest of the team went through post-mission procedures. Equipment turned in, weapons cleaned, debriefs scheduled. The routine tasks that followed combat operations, regardless of how those operations had gone. I sat alone in an equipment bay, methodically cleaning my rifle. The weapon had performed flawlessly, but I maintained it with the same obsessive attention I always did. Each component was inspected, cleaned, lubricated, and reassembled. The ritual was calming after the chaos of the morning. Footsteps approached. I looked up to see Kane standing in the doorway, 2 bottles of water in his hands. He offered one to me without speaking. I accepted it, and he sat down on a gear crate nearby. "We thought you were intel," Kane said, finally. "Or maybe comms. Brennan even joked you might be someone's sister getting a deployment vacation." I did not respond immediately. I continued working on my rifle, running a patch through the barrel with practiced strokes. Kane watched my hands move with the kind of precision that spoke to thousands of hours of practice. "I'm sorry we didn't take you seriously," Kane continued. "That was on us." I set down my cleaning rod and looked at him directly. "You had no reason to think otherwise. The operational security requirements meant I couldn't correct your assumptions. No apology necessary." Kane nodded but still looked uncomfortable. "Still," he said, "you saved the mission. You saved us." Brennan would be dead if that enemy sniper had gotten a second shot. I picked up my bolt carrier group and began inspecting it. Brennan would have done the same for me. That's what teammates do. The simple statement seemed to ease something in Kane's expression. He took a long drink of water and changed the subject slightly. "Where did you learn to shoot like that? I've been through advanced marksmanship courses, and I couldn't make half those shots you made today." I considered how much to reveal. The truth was complicated and mostly classified, but Kane had fought beside me and earned some measure of honesty. Marine Scout Sniper School, I said, then advanced special operations training with instructors who had been shooting longer than I've been alive, then 3 deployments doing work that doesn't appear in official records. You learn or you don't come home. Kane absorbed this. How many deployments total counting this one? 6, I replied. Iraq twice, Afghanistan 3 times, and 6 months attached to a unit I can't name, doing things I can't discuss. The mystery seemed to satisfy Kane more than details would have. He stood to leave, but paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad you were with us today, and I'm glad I was wrong about you. I gave him a slight smile. I'm glad you were wrong, too. After Kane left, I finished my weapon maintenance and secured my gear. The debrief was scheduled for 1400 hours. I had time to shower and grab food before facing the questions that would come. Questions about my shot selection, my tactical decisions, my displacement from assigned position. Except Maddox had authorized it. Iron Wolf Sniper Take Point. Those 4 words had shifted me from support to primary sniper, and everything that followed had been within the scope of that authorization. Still, someone higher up the chain of command would want explanations for why the mission profile had changed so dramatically. The shower was brief and hot. I stood under the spray and let the water wash away the dust and sweat of the morning. My shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. 14 shots in rapid succession, some of them from awkward positions, had left my muscles protesting. I would be sore tomorrow, but that was acceptable. 6 men alive was worth some muscle pain. The dining facility was mostly empty during the midday lull. I filled a tray with food I did not particularly want, but knew I needed to eat. I found a corner table and began mechanically consuming calories, while my mind replayed the engagement. The enemy sniper had been good, not great, but competent enough to hit Brennan on a first shot from 700 meters. That suggested training beyond militia standard. Syrian-Iranian advisor foreign fighter with military experience. The question nagged at me because it implied enemy capability assessments might be wrong. Drummond appeared with his own tray and sat down across from me without asking. He ate in silence for several minutes before speaking. Maddox wants to see you before the debrief, he said. His office at 13:30. I nodded acknowledgement. Drummond continued eating, but his body language suggested he had more to say. I waited. I've been doing this for 8 years, Drummond finally said. SEAL teams, direct action, the whole package. I've worked with some serious operators, but what you did today was something else. I took a drink of water. I did my job. Drummond shook his head. No, your job was support and communications. What you did was save our entire operation from turning into a disaster. Brennan goes down, we lose Overwatch, the target escapes, and we're taking fire from defenders we can't effectively engage. That mission was dead. You brought it back. The compliment was genuine, and I recognized it as such. But I also understood that Drummond was processing his own assumptions and how badly they had misled him. I chose my words carefully. The enemy made mistakes, I said. They revealed their sniper position with the first shot. They didn't anticipate a backup shooter. Their leader exposed himself during the confusion. I exploited their errors. That's not exceptional. That's basic tactics. Drummond studied my expression. You really believe that? It was not a question, but I answered anyway. I believe that confidence without competence gets people killed. I also believe that competence without confidence gets people killed. The balance is knowing what you can do and doing it without hesitation when required. The philosophy seemed to resonate with Drummond. He finished his meal and stood. See you at the debrief, he said. And Callahan, for what it's worth, I'd work with you again. I watched him leave and then returned to my own food. The acceptance from the SEALs mattered more than I wanted to admit. Respect from operators at that level was not easily earned, and I recognized the significance of what Drummond had just offered. At 13:30, I knocked on Maddox's office door. His voice called me in. The lieutenant commander sat behind a desk covered in maps and reports, looking tired but satisfied. He gestured to a chair. Sit. We have 20 minutes before the formal debrief, and I want to cover some things first. I sat and waited. Maddox pulled out a folder marked with security classifications that made it clear this was not standard after-action paperwork. I just got off a call with JSOC, Maddox said. They're very pleased with the mission outcome. Target eliminated minimal friendly casualties. Intelligence gathered from the compound. By every metric, this was a success. He paused and looked at me directly. They also want to know why my after-action report lists a Marine sergeant with 14 confirmed kills when the mission profile only allocated for one sniper position. I kept my expression neutral. I can explain the tactical sequence if required, sir. Maddox waved that away. I know the tactical sequence. I was there. What I need to understand is why you didn't inform the team of your actual role before insertion. The question was fair. I had considered it myself during the helicopter ride back. I organized my thoughts before responding. Operational security required compartmentalization, I said. If the team knew I was backup sniper, their behavior might have changed. Radio chatter might have referenced it. Small details that could have indicated to enemy surveillance that we had redundant capability. By maintaining my cover as support, we presented a single point of failure that made the enemy confident their counter-sniper could neutralize our overwatch. Maddox considered this. And if Brennan had not been hit, if the mission had gone perfectly, then my role would have remained unknown and the team would have completed the operation without ever knowing they had backup, I replied. That was acceptable. My ego doesn't require recognition. The answer seemed to satisfy Maddox. He made a note in this folder and then looked up again. The team knows now. They saw what you can do. That changes dynamics going forward. I understood what he was really asking. Will I continue to be effective now that the surprise is gone? I met his eyes. Respect is easier to work with than skepticism. I'll adapt. Maddox nodded slowly. JSOC wants you to remain attached to our operations for the next 3 months. They believe having you as embedded precision capability gives us options other teams don't have. How do you feel about that? I did not need to think about my answer. If the command believes I can contribute, I'll serve where assigned. Maddox closed the folder. Good, because I agree with them. What you did today was not just good shooting. It was good tactics under pressure. That's rare. He stood indicating the meeting was over. I rose as well. As I reached the door, Maddox spoke again. One more thing. The call sign. Iron Wolf. Where did it come from? I had been asked this before, though, usually by people who had not earned the right to know. But Maddox had trusted me with his team's lives, and I owed him honesty. My first deployment, I said, Iraq, 2019. I spent 3 weeks in Overwatch waiting for a target. Alone, no support, living on minimal supplies. When the target finally appeared, I took the shot from 1,100 meters in wind conditions that should have made it impossible. My spotter, the only other person who knew I was there, said I had the patience of a wolf and the precision of iron. The name stuck. Maddox absorbed this. 3 weeks alone, I nodded. It was necessary for the mission. The lieutenant commander shook his head slightly. Most people would have broken mentally after 3 days in those conditions. I allowed myself a small smile. Most people aren't snipers, sir. We're used to being patient. The formal debrief took 3 hours. Intelligence officers asked detailed questions about enemy positions. Weapons observed tactical behavior. I answered each query with precision, describing site pictures and engagement sequences with the clinical detachment of someone reporting facts rather than reliving combat. When the intelligence section finished, a colonel from Special Operations Command took over. His questions focused less on what happened and more on why I had made specific tactical decisions. Why engage the sniper first instead of protecting the target? Why displace from my assigned position? Why continue engaging after the primary objective was eliminated? I explained my reasoning for each decision. The enemy sniper represented the immediate threat to team survival. Displacement was necessary to achieve proper sight lines. Continued engagement prevented organized pursuit of the withdrawing SEALs. Every choice had been tactical calculation rather than emotional reaction. The colonel seemed satisfied. He thanked me for my service and dismissed me with instructions to remain available for follow-up questions. I left the debrief room and found the entire SEAL team waiting in the hallway outside. Maddox stood at the front of the group. Behind him, Drummond Kane and 4 other SEALs I had not yet gotten to know well. They had clearly been waiting for me to finish. "We're heading to the team room," Maddox said. "You should come." It was phrased as a suggestion, but carried the weight of invitation. I recognized what was being offered. The team room was sacred space reserved for operators and the bonds they formed through shared danger. Being invited meant acceptance at a level that went beyond professional respect. I nodded. I'd like that. The team room was sparse and functional. Worn couches, a battered table lockers with names stenciled on them, and walls covered with unit patches and photographs from deployments going back years. Someone had started coffee brewing, and the smell filled the space with familiar comfort. I accepted a cup from Kane and found a seat on one of the couches. The SEALs arranged themselves around the room with the casual ease of people completely comfortable in each other's presence. For several minutes, nobody spoke. We simply existed together, decompressing from the mission in the way that soldiers had done since warfare began. Finally, Drummond broke the silence. "So, we're going to talk about how Callahan dropped 14 guys in 10 minutes, or are we just going to pretend that's normal?" The question released tension that had been building. Several SEALs laughed. I found myself smiling despite my usual reserve. 14 confirmed, one of the other SEALs said. His name was Rodriguez, and he had been pulling rear security during the engagement. "But I'm betting some of those shots through walls connected too. Could be 16 or 17. I shook my head. "I only count confirmed visual kills. Anything else is speculation." Kane leaned forward from his position against the wall. "Walk us through it." "The enemy sniper shot. What happened next from your perspective?" I set down my coffee and considered how to explain the cognitive process that had guided my actions. It was difficult to articulate something that had become mostly instinct through repetition. "Brennan went down," I began. My immediate assessment was that the enemy had a competent marksman in an elevated position we hadn't identified during planning. That represented a critical threat because he could systematically eliminate our team while we were pinned by compound defenders. I paused to organize my thoughts. The first priority was neutralizing that sniper. I'd already identified a better shooting position during our initial setup, so I displaced while Maddox was moving Brennan to cover. The enemy shooter had revealed his location with muzzle flash, and I had range and wind data from observing Brennan's earlier work. "You took one shot," Rodriguez said. 730 meters moving target, who knew Americans were present, and you dropped him first round. I nodded. He made a mistake. After hitting Brennan, he shifted position to acquire a second target. The movement gave me a clear silhouette for 2 seconds. That was enough. Drummond whistled softly. "Most snipers I know would have taken 3 or 4 shots to bracket that target. You trusted your first round calculation." "Hesitation gets people killed," I replied simply. I had confidence in my data and my weapon. The shot was difficult, but achievable. "What about the target himself?" Kane asked. "The vehicle was moving. He was in an armored SUV, and you threaded a shot through a partially open window." "How is that even possible?" I smiled slightly. "It's not possible if you think about it too much. The calculation has to be automatic. Distance, movement, angle, environmental factors. Your brain processes all of it faster than conscious thought if you've done it enough times." I leaned back into the couch. I saw the window gap and recognized it as the only viable shot opportunity. The vehicle was moving in a predictable pattern, and I had perhaps 3 seconds before it reached cover. The math was complex, but the execution was simple. Lead the target, compensate for drop and wind, press the trigger. And the driver just happened to be in line with the passenger compartment Rodriguez added. Actually, I corrected, I shot the driver deliberately. Stopping the vehicle created a secondary opportunity. When the target exited the crashed SUV, he presented a clear target at a known distance with no movement complications. The SEALs absorbed this. I had not just made lucky shots. I had created tactical opportunities through precision that forced the enemy into positions where they became vulnerable. Maddox had been quiet during the exchange, but now he spoke. "What Callahan is not mentioning is that she did all of this while compound defenders were shooting at our position. Most people can't make perfect shots on a flat range with no pressure. She did it under fire with teammates wounded and a mission failing." I felt uncomfortable with the praise. I did what I was trained to do. Drummond shook his head. Training explains skill. It doesn't explain staying calm when everything is chaos. That's something else. That's the difference between being good at your job and being exceptional. An idea seemed to occur to him, and he stood up. Hold on, I want to show you something. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a laptop. After a few moments of typing, he turned the screen so everyone could see. It showed a map with colored icons marking positions. This is data from our helmet cameras and tracking systems, Drummond explained. Blue icons are our team. Red is enemy. Look at the timeline. The map began animating, showing the engagement from a top-down perspective. Brennan was hit. My position changed to one the system had not previously registered. Then red icons began disappearing in rapid succession. Each represented an enemy I had eliminated. 14 kills in 9 minutes, 40 seconds, Drummond narrated. Average time between shots was 41 seconds. Longest gap was 2 minutes when you were displacing to cover our withdrawal. Shortest was 7 seconds when you took out the flanking element. He looked at me with something approaching awe. You were running a systematic elimination pattern. Tower guards first to remove overwatch threats. Machine gunners second to stop suppressive fire. Then mobile threats, then targets of opportunity. You weren't just shooting. You were solving the tactical problem one bullet at a time. I had not thought about it in those terms during the engagement. I had simply identified threats and eliminated them in priority order. But seeing the pattern visualized made me realize how automatic my tactical processing had become. It's easier when you're not the one being shot at directly, I said. The enemy was focused on the main team position. That gave me freedom to work without immediate pressure. Kane laughed. You had freedom because they didn't know where you were. And they didn't know where you were because you kept moving and never gave them a second shot from the same position. That's tradecraft at a level most snipers never achieve. The conversation continued for another hour. SEALs asked questions about specific shots, about my training, about other missions I had run. I answered what I could while keeping classified details appropriately vague. The atmosphere was relaxed, but carried an undertone of genuine curiosity. These men wanted to understand what made Iron Wolf exceptional. Eventually, someone mentioned that Brennan was out of surgery and in recovery. The mood shifted from analytical to concerned. Maddox stood and announced that visiting hours started in 20 minutes. The team began gathering to go check on their wounded teammate. I started to excuse myself, assuming the visit was for core team members only, but Maddox caught my arm. You're coming too, he said. Brennan wants to see you. The recovery ward was quiet. Brennan lay in a bed with his shoulder heavily bandaged and an IV drip running into his arm. He was conscious but groggy from medications. When the team entered, his eyes found me immediately. The woman who saved my life, Brennan said, his voice slightly slurred. They told me you took over my shot, told me you got 14. I don't believe it. I approached his bedside. 14 confirmed. The target is eliminated. Mission accomplished. Brennan tried to laugh, but it turned into a wince. My shot was supposed to be the easy one. 800 meters stationary target, perfect conditions. You got stuck with the hard version. Someone had to, I replied. You would have done the same. Brennan reached out with his good hand, and I took it. His grip was weak, but the gesture was significant. Thank you, he said quietly. Seriously, thank you. The room fell silent. These men dealt with violence and death as profession, but gratitude between warriors carried weight that civilians could never fully understand. I squeezed Brennan's hand gently. Heal up fast. I prefer working with you as primary. Backup is stressful. That got a genuine laugh from Brennan, despite the pain. Your backup. Damn, the best sniper I know is playing second chair. What does that make me third chair now? Drummond called from across the room. Callahan moved up. The team stayed for 30 minutes, filling Brennan in on the debrief and the colonel's reaction. They carefully avoided mentioning how close the mission had come to complete failure, focusing instead on the successful outcome. Before we left, Brennan looked at me one more time. Iron Wolf. I heard Maddox use that call sign, but I didn't know what it meant. Now I do. You hunt in silence, and you never miss. I gave him a slight smile. Heal quickly. We have more work to do. 2 weeks passed in a blur of routine. Training exercises, equipment, maintenance, intelligence briefings on potential targets. The dynamic within the team had shifted in subtle but significant ways. I was no longer the quiet support Marine. I was Iron Wolf, and that carried expectations. Brennan remained on limited duty, his shoulder healing well, but not yet cleared for operations. He spent his time reviewing intelligence and helping plan future missions. When the official orders arrived, he was the first to find me. I was at the range, running through drills at various distances. Brennan approached with a folder in his hand and a grin on his face. "Just came through," he said, handing me the folder. "You're officially one of us now." I opened the folder. Permanent attachment to SEAL Team 5, promotion to Staff Sergeant, effective immediately. There was more. A locker assignment in the team room, my name already stenciled on it. "Welcome to the team officially," Brennan said. "Try not to make the rest of us look bad with your ridiculous shooting." I smiled. "I'll do my best to miss occasionally, just to maintain your ego." That afternoon, Maddox called a team meeting. New intelligence had come in. A bomb maker operating near the Iraqi border, responsible for attacks that had killed dozens of coalition personnel. He was scheduled to meet with an unknown individual that intelligence suspected might be an even higher value capture opportunity. 2 objectives instead of 1. The tactical complexity multiplied. I studied the intelligence photographs spread across the table. The meeting was scheduled to occur in a remote farmhouse surrounded by open terrain. Good fields of fire for overwatch, but limited cover for approach. The SEALs would be exposed during their movement to the objective. "What's the priority?" I asked. "Primary target elimination or potential capture of the unknown individual." Maddox consulted his orders. "JSOC wants both if possible. Primary target is confirmed kill. Unknown individual is capture preferred, but kill authorized if capture is not feasible." I nodded and returned to studying the terrain. The farmhouse had a single approach road and open ground on all sides. Any assault would be visible from hundreds of meters away, unless it happened at night with element of surprise. Drummond pointed to an irrigation ditch that ran within 50 meters of the farmhouse. "If we use that for covered approach, we could get close before being detected. But we'd need overwatch to suppress any guards who spot us." I measured distances on the satellite imagery. The nearest elevation, suitable for sniper support, was 1,400 meters from the farmhouse. Extreme range even for my capabilities. I had made shots at that distance during training, but never in combat where variables multiplied. 1,400 meters, I said aloud. Possible, but difficult. Wind conditions at that range require perfect calculation. "Can you make the shots?" Maddox asked directly. I met his eyes. "I can make the shots. My accuracy at that range depends on environmental factors I can't fully predict. I'd estimate 80% confidence on individual targets lower if they're moving." Maddox considered this. 80% is better than 0. We need you on that position." The planning continued for hours. Insertion timing, communication protocols, extraction contingencies. I contributed throughout my tactical input, shaping the operation as much as any SEAL at the table. That evening, I returned to the range to practice at extreme distances. I set targets at 1,400 meters and began the painstaking process of refining my calculations. Wind reading at that range required reading mirage and vegetation movement across the entire bullet path. Temperature gradients affected trajectory in ways that were difficult to predict. Every variable mattered. Kane joined me after an hour. He watched me fire several shots, noting how I adjusted after each one based on impact observation. "That's a hell of a long shot," Kane observed. I nodded without taking my eye from the scope. "The bullet drops about 400 inches at this range. Wind can push it 3 feet laterally, and that assumes I calculated air density correctly based on temperature and altitude." I fired again. The shot impacted 6 inches left of center. I made a minor scope adjustment. "How do you even see the target at that distance?" Kane asked. "Magnification helps," I replied. "But mostly you're not shooting at what you see. You're shooting at where mathematics says the bullet will be when it arrives. The actual aiming point is several feet above and to the side of the target. Kane shook his head. I've done long-range shooting. I know the theory. But putting it into practice when people are shooting back is something else entirely. I fired 3 more rounds, grouping them within 8 inches at 1,400 meters. Acceptable accuracy, but not perfect. I would need to do better during the actual mission. The mind game is harder than the physical shot, I said. At this range, the bullet flight time is almost 2 seconds. You pull the trigger and wait. If the target moves during that time, you miss. If your wind call was wrong, you miss. If your range estimation was off by even 50 meters, you miss. I reloaded and continued. The key is accepting that you can't control everything. You make the best calculation possible with available data and trust your training. Doubt creates hesitation, and hesitation creates failure. Kane absorbed this philosophy. You make it sound simple. It is simple, I replied. Not easy, but simple. Calculate, compensate, execute. Everything else is just noise. 3 days later, we inserted for the operation. The helicopter dropped us 8 kilometers from the target to avoid acoustic detection. I separated from the team and began my solo movement toward the overwatch position while the SEALs moved toward their covered approach route. The terrain was desert scrub and low hills. I moved through the darkness with careful navigation, using natural terrain features to mask my movement. The 1,400-meter shot required me to be on a specific ridgeline with a specific angle. There was no backup position that would work. I reached the ridgeline 2 hours before the scheduled meeting. Time to establish my hide range, the target area, and prepare for what would be the longest combat shots of my career. The farmhouse was barely visible, even through my scope at maximum magnification. I built my shooting position with meticulous care. Every rock placement mattered. Every angle had to be perfect. I used my laser rangefinder to confirm the distance. 1,417 meters. I recorded wind speed and direction at my position, knowing it would be different along the bullet path. The sun rose slowly, revealing the farmhouse and surrounding terrain. I could see guards moving around the property. I counted 4 external security and assumed more inside. The primary target, an unknown individual, had not yet arrived. Maddox checked in via radio. Iron Wolf team is in position, holding for target arrival. I acknowledged and continued my preparation. I had identified primary and secondary shooting lanes, calculated holdovers for different target positions, prepared range cards for quick reference. Everything that could be controlled was controlled. Movement on the approach road. 2 vehicles arrived and parked near the farmhouse. Men emerged. I studied them through my scope. One matched the photographs of the primary target. The other was unfamiliar, but carried himself with authority. Probably the unknown individual JSOC wanted captured. Both targets entered the farmhouse with their security detail. The meeting had begun. Maddox would wait until they emerged to initiate the assault. I maintained my vigil, watching guard positions and memorizing patterns of movement. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. The waiting was part of the job. I remained motionless, controlling my breathing and maintaining focus despite the discomfort of my position. Finally, movement from the farmhouse. The primary target, an unknown individual, emerged, walking toward the vehicles while discussing something. This was the moment the SEALs would begin their approach, and I would need to provide precision fire support from almost a mile away. Maddox transmitted, "Team moving. Stand by for targets of opportunity." I settled into my final shooting position. The primary target and unknown individual were 40 feet apart. Security personnel surrounded them. The geometry was challenging but workable. A guard spotted the SEALs moving through the irrigation ditch. He raised his rifle and shouted a warning. I had perhaps 2 seconds before the entire farmhouse exploded into defensive action. I centered my crosshairs on the guard, applied my calculated holds for distance and wind. The shot was so far beyond normal engagement ranges that the target appeared as barely more than a heat shimmer in my scope. I pressed the trigger and began counting. 1,001, 1,002. The guard collapsed. My bullet had arrived after nearly 2 full seconds of flight. The other guards whirled in confusion, unable to determine where the shot had originated. The SEALs used the confusion to close distance, sprinting, now racing to reach the farmhouse, before the enemy organized. I provided covering fire, engaging guards who tried to establish defensive positions. My second shot dropped a guard reaching for a radio. Third shot eliminated a fighter running toward a mounted weapon. Each engagement required complete recalculation. Each target moved differently. Each shot was a separate mathematics problem solved in seconds. The primary target was running toward his vehicle. I led him by 15 feet, accounting for his movement and the bullet flight time. I fired. The target stumbled and fell. "Confirm kill on primary objective," I transmitted. The unknown individual dove behind a vehicle. The SEALs were closing fast, but he had drawn a weapon. I could not see him clearly, but I could see his shadow on the ground. I aimed for where his body should be based on the shadow position and fired through the vehicle. The shadow stopped moving. Either I had hit him or he was taking cover. Maddox's team reached the vehicles seconds later. Drummond's voice came over the radio. "Unknown individual is wounded but alive. We have him." I maintained overwatch while the SEALs secured the target and neutralized remaining resistance. My shot count for this engagement was 7, all at ranges exceeding 1,300 meters, all successful. The extraction was clean. The team moved to the landing zone with their captured objective while I displaced from my position. By the time I reached the extraction point, the helicopter was already inbound. On the flight back, Maddox sat beside me. His expression was one of genuine amazement. "You shot through a vehicle at 1,400 meters and hit a target you couldn't see," he said. "How is that even possible? I was cleaning my rifle, a habit I maintained even in the helicopter." Shadow geometry. I could see where his shadow fell, which told me his approximate position. The vehicle was thin metal that my round could penetrate. The calculation was complex, but achievable. Maddox shook his head. "Every mission you do something that shouldn't be possible. At some point, it stops being luck and starts being something else." I looked at him seriously. "It's not luck and it's not magic. It's preparation meeting opportunity." I spent hundreds of hours practicing at extreme ranges. When the mission required those skills, I was ready. I reassembled my bolt carrier group and continued. That's what separates adequate from exceptional. Adequate shooters practice what they know. Exceptional ones practice what they might need. The captured individual provided intelligence that changed everything. Under interrogation, he revealed himself as a regional coordinator for a network that had been operating undetected for 3 years. The information he provided led to the biggest joint operation SEAL Team 5 had undertaken in a year. I sat in a mission briefing with a room full of personnel that extended beyond our usual team. 2 other SEAL Team's intelligence analysts, air support coordinators, a Marine infantry company providing outer security. This was not a surgical strike. This was a full-scale assault on a compound housing multiple high-value targets. The operations officer laid out the plan on a massive display screen. The compound was fortified and defended by an estimated 40 to 60 enemy fighters. Multiple buildings' underground tunnels prepared defensive positions. This would be a fight. My role was critical. I would establish overwatch from a water tower 800 meters from the compound. My position would provide commanding views of the entire objective area. 3 other snipers from the additional SEAL teams would occupy supporting positions. For the first time, I would be working as part of a coordinated sniper element, rather than operating alone. After the briefing, the 4 snipers met to coordinate sectors of fire and communication protocols. The other 3 were experienced operators I recognized by reputation. Chief Petty Officer Gideon Frost, 35 years old, with over 100 combat kills. Petty Officer Sloan Barrett, 31, and a winner of multiple shooting competitions. Petty Officer Finn Mercer, 27, and known for his ability to make impossible shots in urban terrain. Frost took the lead in the planning session. His tone was professional, carrying the confidence of someone used to being the best shooter in any room. He pointed to the water tower on the map. "Iron Wolf takes primary overwatch from the tower. Barrett, you're on the eastern building providing crossfire. Mercer western position for vehicle interdiction. I'll establish on the southern ridge for counter-sniper." I studied the plan and identified a potential problem. The water tower offered excellent visibility, but zero cover if the enemy located my position. I would be exposed to return fire from multiple directions. The tower is a strong position for observation, I said, but vulnerable if I get compromised. What's the contingency if I take effective fire? Frost looked at me with slight surprise. He had not expected the question. Before he could respond, Barrett spoke up. She's right, that tower is exposed. We should have a secondary position identified in case she needs to displace under fire. Frost nodded, accepting the tactical logic. Secondary position is the northern building rooftop 300 meters from the tower. If you get compromised, displace there and continue engagement. The planning continued for another hour. By the end, I had a clear understanding of my responsibilities and those of the other snipers. The coordination was more complex than operating alone, but the redundancy provided better coverage of the objective area. That evening, I checked my equipment with extra care. The upcoming operation was the largest I had participated in since joining the team. More moving parts meant more opportunities for things to go wrong. I verified my ammunition load, inspected my rifle, tested my communications gear. Everything had to be perfect. Kane found me in the equipment bay performing my pre-mission ritual. He sat quietly and watched me work through my checklist with methodical precision. "Big one tomorrow," Kane said. I nodded without looking up from my inspection. "Biggest since I joined the team. 40 to 60 enemy fighters means sustained engagement. I'm carrying twice my normal ammunition load." Kane leaned forward. "What do you think about working with the other snipers?" I considered the question. Frost is skilled, but he leads with confidence. Barrett is competent and tactical. Mercer is young but talented. We'll function effectively as long as everyone follows the plan. And if things go sideways, Kane asked. "Then I'll adapt," I replied. "That's what we do." The next morning brought perfect weather. Clear skies, minimal wind, good visibility. The kind of conditions that favored precision shooting. I loaded into the helicopter, my mind already running through the engagement sequences I had visualized dozens of times. The flight to the objective area took 30 minutes. I used the time to review my range cards one final time. The helicopter dropped me at the water tower. I climbed the external ladder while the bird lifted away to avoid drawing attention. The tower interior was exposed metal framework and a large water tank. I established my position on a maintenance platform that provided stable shooting but minimal concealment. Through my scope, I could see the compound clearly. Guards on rooftops, vehicles positioned for rapid response, prepared fighting positions around the perimeter. The enemy was ready for a fight. They just did not know it was coming today. I keyed my radio. Iron Wolf in position, visual on compound, counting 22 external security personnel. Frost acknowledged from his position. Barrett and Mercer checked in shortly after. The sniper element was established. Now we waited for the assault force to begin their movement. Maddox's voice came through clearly. "All elements standby. H-hour in 10 minutes. I settled into my shooting position and began my final preparations. I identified priority targets, calculated holds for different ranges, prepared mentally for the violence that was about to unfold. 5 minutes to H-hour, a radio transmission crackled with unexpected urgency. It was Frost's voice, tense and sharp. "I have movement on the southern approach. Multiple vehicles. Ambush incoming. This is not on the timeline." I shifted my scope toward the southern road. 3 technical vehicles with mounted weapons were approaching the compound. Unknown reinforcements arriving at exactly the wrong time. If they reached the compound before the assault began, the enemy strength would increase significantly. Maddox made a rapid decision. All sniper elements engage approaching vehicles. Disable them before they reach the compound. I calculated range to the lead vehicle, 1,000 meters and closing. I aimed for the driver and fired. The truck swerved violently and crashed into a ditch. Barrett and Mercer engaged the second and third vehicles simultaneously. Within seconds, all 3 trucks were immobilized. But the fighters inside were dismounting, taking defensive positions between the assault force and the objective. What had been a 3-vehicle problem was now a 15 to 20 fighter problem, positioned exactly where we did not want them. Frost's voice came over the radio. "We just compromised the element of surprise. The compound is going to full alert." I watched through my scope as guards in the compound reacted to the gunfire. They were scrambling to defensive positions. The careful plan was unraveling. All elements, Maddox transmitted. We're accelerating the timeline. Assault force moving now. Sniper element suppress compound defenses. I shifted my focus back to the compound. Guards were establishing positions on rooftops and behind walls. I began engaging systematically. First shot dropped a guard with an RPG. Second eliminated a fighter manning a mounted weapon. Third neutralized someone who appeared to be directing the defense. The engagement became the most intense of my career. Multiple targets, constant movement, friendly forces advancing under fire. I worked through my magazines with mechanical efficiency, each shot carefully placed for maximum effect. A guard appeared on a rooftop directly across from my position. He was scanning with binoculars, searching for the American sniper positions. I watched him focus on my tower. He dropped the binoculars and raised his rifle. I fired first. The guard collapsed, but not before getting a shot off that impacted the water tank 2 feet from my head. The tower position was compromised. Incoming fire struck the tower structure. The enemy had identified my location, and multiple fighters were now engaging my position. Metal sparked around me, the air filled with the crack of near misses. For a brief moment, I felt the weight of exposure. No cover, nowhere to hide. Just open metal framework and a water tank that provided concealment but not protection. I pushed the thought aside. Panic would get me killed faster than enemy fire. I began gathering my gear for displacement to the secondary position. More rounds sparked off metal around me. I moved down the ladder while bullets sang past each rung, a calculated risk. Barrett's voice came over the radio, providing covering fire. Mercer engaged targets trying to cut off my displacement route. I reached the northern building and sprinted up the external stairs to the rooftop. The new position offered different angles but acceptable coverage. I re-established my shooting platform and resumed engagement within 90 seconds of leaving the tower. My breathing steadied, heart rate normalized. Back in the fight. Frost's voice came through, strained with pain. I'm hit, shoulder wound, multiple fighters moving through the tunnel system. They're trying to escape south. I can't hold this position. I adjusted my scope and found the southern ridge where Frost had established. I could see him behind cover, clearly struggling. I could also see fighters moving through terrain that would bring them behind his position. Affirmative, I transmitted to Maddox. I have visual on Chief Frost and incoming threats to his 6. Engage, Maddox ordered. I began eliminating the threats moving toward Frost. The range was extreme, around 1,200 meters, and the targets were using cover effectively. I worked methodically, waiting for each target to expose themselves. 1 down, 2 down, 3 down. The fighters were trying to flank Frost's position using a ravine for concealment. I read their movement pattern, anticipated where they would emerge. When the 4th fighter appeared exactly where I expected, I was already compensated for the shot. 4 down. Frost's voice came through, grudging respect evident despite his pain. Good shooting, Iron Wolf. Stay down, I replied. I have you covered. The battle continued for another 20 minutes before the compound was fully secured. The assault force had accomplished their objectives. All high-value targets were captured or eliminated, but the cost had been higher than planned. Frost wounded, 3 other operators injured. Multiple enemy fighters had escaped through tunnels before they could be sealed. My final count for the operation was 28 confirmed kills, the highest single mission total of my career. 28. The number settled over me like a weight. More than double my previous single mission record. More than some snipers achieved in entire careers. I sat on the helicopter floor, rifle across my lap, and felt the adrenaline finally draining away. My hands were steady, my breathing was controlled, but somewhere beneath the professional calm, I recognized what I had just done. 28 families would receive notifications. 28 lives ended because I had made the calculations, compensated for wind and distance, and pressed the trigger. Every shot had been justified. Every kill had been necessary to protect my teammates and accomplish the mission. But that did not make the number any lighter. Frost caught my eye from his litter, gave a small nod of acknowledgement. He understood. Every operator who had taken lives in combat understood. The weight was part of the job. You carried it because the alternative was letting your teammates die. I returned the nod and looked back out at the valley disappearing below us. 28 confirmed. 0 missions failed. The standard maintained. The medical tent smelled of blood and disinfectant. Frost sat on a treatment table, while a corpsman worked on his shoulder wound the bullet having passed through muscle without hitting bone or major vessels. Painful, but not career-ending. He would recover fully with time and rehabilitation. I entered the tent to check on him. Frost looked up, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he extended his good hand. "You saved my life," he said simply. "I was focused on the tunnel exit, didn't see the flanking element. If you hadn't been watching my 6, I'd be dead." I shook his hand, feeling the weakness in his grip from the medications and blood loss. Frost continued, his voice steady despite the pain. "When we first met for planning, I dismissed you. I've been doing this for 12 years, and I let ego convince me that nobody could be better. Today, you proved me wrong. 28 confirmed kills displacement under fire precision shooting at extreme range while our guys were in contact. That was the finest combat shooting I've ever witnessed." I felt uncomfortable with the praise, but recognized that Frost needed to say it. Sometimes acknowledgement of error was as important as the tactical excellence that revealed it. "You're an exceptional shooter yourself," I replied. "Your call on the tunnel movement saved lives. We all contribute what we can." The corpsman finished his work and moved to the next patient. Frost stood carefully testing his mobility. He looked at me with an expression that mixed respect and something that might have been friendship. "When I get cleared for duty again," Frost said, "I'd be honored to work with you on future operations. Not as senior sniper trying to prove dominance, but as an equal who has a lot to learn from your approach." I nodded. "I look forward to it." Outside the medical tent, the sun was setting over the base. The operation had lasted all day, and exhaustion was catching up with everyone involved. I found a quiet spot near the equipment staging area and sat down to process the events. 28 people were dead because I had pulled a trigger. The number was staggering, even though every kill had been justified and necessary. I thought about the weight that number carried. 28 families would not see their sons or fathers or brothers again. The fact that those men had chosen violence and threatened American lives did not erase their humanity in my mind. I pulled out a small notebook I carried and made 28 marks on a page, a ritual I had started years ago. Each mark represented a life taken. I did not keep the count out of pride. I kept it as a reminder that my actions had consequences beyond tactical success. The notebook kept me grounded, kept me from becoming the kind of operator who stopped seeing enemies as human beings. Footsteps approached. Maddox sat down beside me without asking. He had that ability to know when someone needed company versus solitude. Right now, I appreciated the former. "Hell of a day," Maddox said. I closed my notebook. "Hell of a day," I agreed. We sat in silence for several minutes. The base around us continued its perpetual activity, but in this small pocket of space, there was quiet. "JSOC is very pleased," Maddox finally said. "The intelligence gathered from this operation is already producing results. We have locations for 3 additional high-value targets. Funding sources supply routes. This is going to generate work for months." He paused before continuing. "They want to put you in for the Silver Star. 28 confirmed kills in a single engagement. Displacement under fire providing overwatch that prevented friendly casualties. The recommendation is already being drafted." I looked at him with surprise. The Silver Star was the 3rd highest military decoration for valor. It was not given lightly. "I was doing my job," I said. Maddox smiled. "That's what everyone says when they do something extraordinary. But your job doesn't require you to be perfect under impossible conditions. That's choice. And today, you chose to be exactly what this team needed when we needed it most." I did not know how to respond to that. I settled for simple honesty. "Thank you, sir. It means a lot coming from you." "The team is gathering in the mess tent for dinner," Maddox said. "You should join us. They want to celebrate the successful mission, and they specifically asked if you would be there." I stood and brushed dust from my uniform. "Lead the way." The mess tent was crowded with personnel from all the units that had participated in the operation. When I entered with Maddox, a cheer went up from the SEAL tables. Drummond stood and gestured dramatically. Make way for Iron Wolf 28-0, undefeated and undisputed champion. The good-natured ribbing brought laughter from the assembled operators. I felt my face flush, but I smiled. This was acceptance at the deepest level. These men were celebrating me not just as a skilled operator, but as one of their own. I sat at the team table between Kane and Rodriguez. Someone had acquired steaks from somewhere, a rare luxury in a forward operating base. The food was good and the company better. Brennan, still on limited duty, but healing well, raised a water bottle in a toast. To Iron Wolf, who makes the rest of us look like amateurs. And to the team who had the good sense to trust her when it mattered. Bottles and glasses were raised. I felt emotion tighten my throat. I had spent years being underestimated and dismissed. Now I sat surrounded by elite operators who saw me for exactly what I was and valued me because of it, not despite it. The conversation flowed naturally. Stories from the operation, good-natured arguments about who had the best shot, speculation about future missions. I contributed when I had something to add, but mostly listened, absorbing the camaraderie that came from shared danger and shared success. Barrett and Mercer joined the table, pulling up chairs. Barrett looked at me with undisguised admiration. That displacement you made from the tower to the building, Barrett said. I've practiced that kind of movement in training, but never had to do it under fire. How did you stay so calm? I considered the question. Panic is a choice. Fear is automatic, but how you respond to it is a decision. I chose to focus on the tactical problem rather than the emotion. Movement was necessary, so I moved. Mercer leaned forward. And the shots you made to protect Chief Frost. Those were 1,100 meters closer to 1,200, I corrected. The range was extreme and the targets were using cover effectively. The hard part was identifying them through terrain. I had to wait for them to expose themselves. Frost appeared, his arm in a sling, but his spirits clearly improved. He pulled up a chair and inserted himself into the conversation. The hard part was making 12 consecutive precision shots while I was bleeding and our assault force was in contact, Frost said. Let's not undersell what you accomplished. He looked around the table. I've worked with some of the best shooters in the military. Iron Wolf is in a category by herself. The combination of technical skill and tactical awareness is something I haven't seen before. The praise from Frost carried particular weight given his earlier skepticism and his current injury. I recognized it as genuine and hard-earned. I learned from excellent instructors, I said, and I work with operators who push me to be better. None of this happens in isolation. Drummond laughed. There she goes, being humble again. Accept the compliment, Callahan. You're exceptional, and everyone at this table knows it. I smiled and raised my water bottle. To the team, then, to the operators who make impossible missions possible through skill and trust. The toast was echoed around the table. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Someone told a story about a training mishap that had become legendary. Another operator described a bizarre encounter with local wildlife during a previous deployment. The tension and intensity of combat gave way to the simple pleasure of being alive and among friends. Later that evening, I walked back to my quarters under a sky full of stars. The base was quieter now, most personnel having turned in for the night. I thought about the path that had brought me here, from a young Marine trying to prove herself through Scout Sniper School to becoming integral to a SEAL team. The journey had been challenging, but worthwhile. My phone showed a message from my sister back home, brief and supportive. Heard you did something amazing. Stay safe. Love you. I smiled and typed a response. Just doing my job. Miss you too. I entered my quarters and began the ritual of cleaning my rifle. The weapon had performed flawlessly through 28 engagements today. It deserved the same care I gave it after every mission. As I worked, I thought about tomorrow. There would be more planning sessions, more intelligence to review, more missions to prepare for. But tonight I allowed myself to simply appreciate the moment. I was exactly where I belonged, doing exactly what I was meant to do. 6 weeks passed in a rhythm of training and preparation. Frost's shoulder healed, and he was cleared to return to full duty. Brennan had been back for several weeks already, his own recovery complete. The team was whole again, operating at full capacity. Then came the day that would change everything. The main base was decorated with flags and bunting. Senior officers from Joint Special Operations Command had flown in for a ceremony. I stood in formation, wearing my dress uniform, feeling more uncomfortable in this formal setting than I ever did in combat. My family had flown in from Oregon. My mother, Ellen Callahan, retired teacher and widow. My younger sister, Morgan, graduate student with aspirations of becoming a doctor. They stood in the crowd, my sister already crying before the ceremony even began. The citation was read aloud by a colonel I had never met. His voice carried across the formation detailing the events of that day, 6 weeks ago. 28 confirmed enemy kills during sustained combat operations. Tactical displacement under direct fire. Precision engagement at extreme ranges preventing friendly casualties. Exemplary courage under the most demanding circumstances. Each word felt surreal. I had lived those moments, made those decisions, taken those shots. But hearing them described in formal military language made them seem like events that had happened to someone else. A 2-star general approached and pinned the silver star to my chest. He shook my hand, his grip firm and his gaze direct. Staff Sergeant Callahan, he said, your actions represent the finest traditions of military service. You have brought great honor to the Marine Corps and to our special operations community. I stood at attention and delivered the required response. Thank you, sir. I was honored to serve alongside exceptional operators. The formation was dismissed. My family rushed forward to congratulate me. Morgan wrapped me in a fierce hug that threatened to dislodge the newly pinned medal. I always knew you were special, Morgan said through her tears, but I had no idea you were doing things like this. I hugged her back, feeling the weight of all the things I could never tell her about my work. The classified missions, the dangerous operations, the nights spent alone in hostile territory, waiting for targets that might never appear. My mother beamed with pride, her hand trembling slightly as she touched the silver star. Your father would have been so proud. He always said you were tougher than any of the boys in his police academy classes. The SEAL team stood nearby in their own dress uniforms, having attended the ceremony in force. Brennan, now fully recovered and cleared for duty, approached my family. Your sister saves our lives regularly, Brennan told Morgan, and makes it look easy. Morgan looked between Brennan and me with amazement, trying to reconcile the quiet sister she knew with the warrior these men described. The reception following the ceremony was held in the Officers' Club. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations from operators I had worked with and senior leaders I had only met in passing. Everyone seemed to know who Iron Wolf was and what I had accomplished. Frost appeared with a drink in his good hand and a genuine smile on his face. I heard a rumor, Frost said. JSOC is creating a specialized sniper instructor position. Multi-service advanced training. They want someone who can teach the next generation of precision shooters. Your name came up. I felt surprise register on my face. An instructor position would mean leaving the team, leaving the work that had defined me for years. The thought created unexpected conflict. I haven't heard anything official, I replied carefully. You will, Frost said. And for what it's worth, I think you should take it. You've proven everything there is to prove in combat. Teaching others to reach your level would multiply your impact exponentially. I had not considered it in those terms. My focus had always been on the next mission, the next target, the next opportunity to protect my teammates. But Frost had a point. How many lives could be saved if I helped create 50 snipers who operated at even 70% of my capability? Something to think about, I acknowledged. The reception continued for hours. Stories were told and retold, each one slightly embellished, but rooted in genuine shared experience. I found myself laughing at Drummond's description of our first mission together, when everyone had assumed I was just carrying extra batteries and relaying messages. We thought you were there to manage our radio frequencies, Drummond said to the assembled crowd. Turns out, she was there to drop 14 guys in 10 minutes and save our entire operation. Kane raised his glass. To assumptions and the people who prove them wrong. The toast was drunk with enthusiasm. I felt the warmth of genuine affection from these men who had become my brothers. They had tested me through fire and found me worthy. That validation meant more than any medal. As the evening wound down, Maddox found me on the club balcony looking out at the base. He joined me at the railing, both of us enjoying the quiet after hours of noise. "Frost told you about the instructor position," Maddox said. "It was not a question." I nodded. "What do you think I chose my words carefully? Part of me wants to stay with the team, keep doing the work. But another part recognizes that I've been doing this for years. Maybe it's time to pass on what I've learned." I paused, organizing my thoughts. One operator saves 8 teammates per mission. 50 trained operators save 400 teammates. The math is compelling. Maddox turned to face me. "You've earned the right to choose your next step, whether that's staying with us, taking the instructor position, or doing something else entirely. JSOC will support whatever you decide." He added, "But I'll tell you this, the team will miss you if you go. You've become integral to how we operate. Finding someone to fill your role will be nearly impossible." "Brennan's back to full duty," I noted. "Frost will be cleared next week. You'll have 2 exceptional snipers." "True," Maddox agreed. "But they're not you, and the team knows it." I looked out at the base, watching the perpetual activity that never stopped, regardless of day or night. Somewhere out there, other teams were preparing for other missions. Other operators were facing their own challenges. The war machine continued its relentless rhythm. "I need time to think about it," I said. Maddox nodded. "Take all the time you need. The offer will be there when you're ready." That night, alone in my quarters, I sat with the decision weighing on me. The silver star sat in its case on my desk, the metal catching light from the overhead bulb. I thought about what it represented. Not just my actions on one day, but years of training and preparation that had led to that moment. I thought about Jamie, my older brother who had died in Helmand Province 7 years ago. He had been a good Marine, competent and dedicated, but his team's sniper support had failed when it mattered most. An undertrained shooter, an impossible shot, conditions that exceeded capability. 8 Marines died that day because someone was not good enough when lives depended on it. I had spent years making sure I would never be that person. I had trained obsessively, pushed myself beyond normal limits, accepted any assignment that would make me better. And it had worked. 68 confirmed kills across multiple deployments. 0 missions failed. 0 teammates lost because my shot was not there when needed. But now I faced a different question. Was the best way to honor Jamie's memory to continue being that person, or was it to create hundreds of people who would never let their teams down? The math was undeniable. I could continue operating, continue protecting one team on one mission at a time. Or I could teach, and those students would go on to protect dozens of teams on hundreds of missions. The decision crystallized in my mind with sudden clarity. I was not abandoning the fight by becoming an instructor. I was multiplying my impact in ways that operational deployments could never achieve. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Maddox. The lieutenant commander received me in his office with the relaxed professionalism that characterized our relationship. "I've decided to accept the instructor position," I told him without preamble, "if the offer is still available." Maddox showed no surprise. He had probably anticipated this decision from the moment Frost mentioned it. "It's available," he confirmed. "When do you want to start?" "After this next rotation," I said. "Give me 3 months with the team to help transition Brennan and Frost into the primary sniper roles. Then I'll move to the instructor position." Maddox extended his hand across the desk. "Congratulations. You're going to change a lot of lives in that role." I shook his hand, feeling the finality of the decision settle over me. "Thank you for everything you've done for me, sir. This team gave me the opportunity to prove what I could accomplish. I won't forget that." The next 3 months passed quickly. We ran 2 more missions, both successful, both adding to the legacy of SEAL Team 5. I worked closely with Brennan and Frost, sharing techniques and tactical approaches that I had developed over years of operations. They were exceptional students because they were already exceptional operators. They did not need me to teach them how to shoot. They needed me to teach them how to think like I thought how to see tactical problems the way I saw them. Brennan absorbed everything with the focused intensity of someone who had learned the hard way that details mattered. His shoulder injury had given him new appreciation for backup plans and redundant capabilities. Frost approached the learning with humility that had not been there before our first meeting. His own injury had taught him that confidence without preparation was just arrogance waiting to be punished. Together, they would form a formidable sniper element for the team. I had no concerns about leaving SEAL Team 5 in their hands. My final day with the team arrived with the inevitability of tide. The team held a small ceremony in the team room, the sacred space where operators gathered to decompress and bond. Maddox presented me with a plaque. The words were simple but meaningful. Staff Sergeant Reese Callahan Iron Wolf, SEAL Team 5, March 2025 to June 2026. 68 confirmed combat kills. 0 missions failed, the standard all snipers aspire to reach. I looked around the room at faces that had become family through shared danger. Brennan, Drummond, Kane, Rodriguez, Frost, Barrett, Mercer. Each one an exceptional warrior. Each one someone I had fought beside and would trust with my life. This team took a chance on a Marine. Nobody expected much from, I said, feeling emotion tighten my throat. You gave me the opportunity to prove myself and the support to succeed. Everything I accomplished here was possible because you trusted me. I paused to collect my thoughts. Now I'm going to take everything this team taught me and pass it on to the next generation. When you run missions 5 years from now and work with snipers who seem unusually competent, remember they might be my students. That will be my legacy from this time. The room was silent for a moment. Then Drummond started clapping. The applause spread until everyone was standing, recognizing my contribution to their success and survival. Maddox stepped forward with final words. Iron Wolf will always have a home with this team. When you finish your instructor tour, if you want to come back, we'll be here. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without my voice breaking. The transport vehicle arrived an hour later. The team assembled outside to see me off. No formal ceremony, no long speeches. Just professionals saying goodbye to someone who had fought beside them. Brennan shook my hand, his grip strong and steady. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a scar as reminder of the day everything changed. Thanks for keeping me alive, Brennan said, and for teaching me that there's always someone better. Keeps the ego in check. I smiled. Stay sharp, the team needs you. Drummond gave me a bear hug that lifted me off my feet despite my full pack. Take care of yourself out there, Iron Wolf. And remember, you've got brothers here if you ever need us. Kane wished me luck with genuine warmth. Frost simply nodded, understanding, passing between us without words. Barrett and Mercer offered their own farewells, professional and sincere. Maddox was last. He did not shake my hand or offer empty platitudes. He simply looked at me with the expression of a commander who had watched one of his best operators choose a different path. Make them better than us, Maddox said quietly. Make them so good that we look like amateurs in comparison. I will, sir. I climbed into the vehicle and looked back one final time. These men had seen past assumptions and recognized me for who I truly was. They had given me the opportunity to excel and the support to reach my potential. That gift was precious, and I would honor it by doing the same for others. The vehicle pulled away from the base. I watched through the window until the team disappeared from view. Then I turned forward, ready for the next chapter. 6 months later, I stood at an instructor podium facing a class of 24 Marine and Navy sniper candidates. The classroom was stark and functional, designed for learning rather than comfort. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating faces that ranged from eager to skeptical. A mix of men and women, all volunteers, all having passed initial screening that eliminated 70% of applicants. Most were probably underestimating the woman in instructor uniform standing before them. I could read it in their body language, in the way some of them glanced at each other with barely concealed doubt. Good, underestimation had always been my advantage. My name is Staff Sergeant Reese Callahan. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. Call sign Iron Wolf. I'm going to teach you everything I know about precision shooting under combat conditions. I paused, letting that sink in. Some of the faces showed recognition. The call sign meant something in certain circles. Some of you will wash out, I continued. The statistics say that half of you won't make it past the first month. You'll decide that this is too hard, too demanding, requires too much sacrifice. That's fine. We only want people who are willing to pay the price for excellence. I moved from behind the podium, walking along the front of the classroom. Some will barely pass. You'll meet the minimum standards, earn your certification, and go on to have adequate careers as adequate snipers. That's also fine. The military needs competent operators at every level. I stopped and looked directly at the class. And a few of you, if you work hard enough, if you commit completely, if you push past every limit you think you have, might become good enough to save your team when everything goes wrong. The room was absolutely silent. I had their attention now. I expect excellence, I said. I expect discipline. I expect you to prove everyone who underestimates you absolutely wrong. One female candidate in the back row sat up straighter. I saw the recognition in her eyes, the understanding that someone who looked like her had made it to the highest levels of this profession. I gave her a slight smile. I'm not here to make you feel good about yourselves, I continued. I'm not here to tell you that trying hard is enough. I'm here to teach you a craft that will keep your teammates alive when bullets are flying and everything is chaos and you have one chance to make a shot that matters more than anything else in the world. I returned to the podium and placed both hands on it, leaning forward. In 6 months, you will either be snipers or you will be something else. The only thing that will determine which is how badly you want it and how much you're willing to sacrifice to get it. The standards are not negotiable. The expectations are not flexible. And if you think this will be easy because I'm standing here as proof that anyone can do it, you're wrong. I straightened up. I'm standing here as proof that exceptional people who work harder than everyone else and refuse to accept limitations can do it. The question is whether any of you are exceptional enough. One of the male candidates raised his hand. I nodded to him. Staff Sergeant, how many confirmed kills do you have? The question was testing boundaries, seeing if I would share operational details or shut him down for asking. 68, I replied directly. Across 6 deployments, 0 missions failed. 0 teammates lost because my shot wasn't there when needed. I looked at him steadily. The numbers don't matter. What matters is that when my team needed me, I delivered. That's the only metric that counts. Everything else is just statistics. Another hand went up. A woman near the front. What was the longest shot you've made in combat? 1,417 meters, I answered. Syria 2025. Wind conditions that should have made it impossible. I made it anyway, because the mission required it and my team was counting on me. I scanned the room. Any other questions before we start silence? They were processing, evaluating, deciding whether they had what it took or whether they should walk away now before the real pain began. Good, I said. Let's begin. I spent the next hour outlining the curriculum. Ballistics, wind reading, range, estimation, equipment maintenance, physical conditioning, mental preparation, tactical integration. Each topic would be covered in excruciating detail over the coming months. Each skill would be practiced until it became instinct. The candidates took notes, furiously trying to capture everything. I did not slow down or repeat myself. Part of the test was learning to absorb information under pressure. When the session ended, most of them filed out quickly, eager to escape the intensity. But the female candidate from the back row approached the podium. She was young, maybe 23, with the kind of lean build that suggested distance running and pull-ups. Staff Sergeant, she said, her voice quiet but clear. I'm Katie Morrison. I just wanted to say thank you. I looked at her with mild curiosity. For what? For being here, Morrison said. For proving it's possible. I've wanted to be a sniper since I joined the Marines 3 years ago. Every instructor I've had told me I didn't have the right temperament, the right build, the right psychology. They said I should focus on other specialties. I studied her expression. What did you tell them? That they were wrong, Morrison replied. And that I'd prove it. I allowed myself a small smile. Good answer. But understand something, Morrison. I'm not here to make this easier for you because we share a chromosome. I'm here to make you better than you think you can be, and that process is going to hurt. I understand, Staff Sergeant. Do you? I asked. Because in 3 weeks, when you're exhausted and sore and you've failed the same drill 5 times in a row, and every fiber of your being wants to quit, you're going to remember this conversation. You're going to wonder if I'm being harder on you because you're female. And the answer is yes. Morrison's eyes widened slightly. I'm going to be harder on you, I continued, because the enemy won't care about your gender. The wind won't be gentler on your bullets. The distance won't be shorter. The pressure won't be less. So I'm going to prepare you for reality, and reality is not fair or kind or accommodating. I paused. But if you make it through, if you earn your certification from this program, you'll be ready for anything. You'll be the sniper who saves lives when it matters most. And that's worth every moment of pain you're about to endure. Morrison nodded slowly, processing the challenge I had just laid before her. I'll be ready, Staff Sergeant. We'll see, I replied. Dismissed. She left, and I was alone in the classroom. I looked at the empty seats, imagining which ones would still be filled in a month and 3 months at graduation. Statistics said 12 would make it, maybe 13 if this was an exceptional class. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From an underestimated Marine in a SEAL team briefing room to a decorated veteran tasked with creating the next generation of precision shooters. The path had been unexpected but right. I was no longer the operator in the field taking shots that saved missions. I was the force multiplier creating operators who would take those shots on 100 different missions in a dozen different countries. My impact would be measured not in my own confirmed kills, but in the lives saved by students I would never meet on operations I would never know about. That evening, I returned to my quarters on the instructor campus. The space was larger than my previous accommodations, with a desk and bookshelf and room to think. I sat at the desk and opened my notebook, the one with 68 marks representing 68 lives taken. I turned to a fresh page and wrote a single line. Class 001, March 2026. 24 candidates. In 6 months, I would know how many of them earned their place on this page. How many would become the kind of sniper who could be trusted when everything went wrong. How many would carry on the legacy that I had built and the standards I had set. I thought about Morrison in the back row, that mix of determination and doubt in her eyes. In 6 months, she would either prove everyone wrong or join the statistics who washed out. But something told me she would make it. The ones who refused to quit always did. I closed the notebook and looked out the window. Somewhere out there, SEAL Team 5 was planning their next mission. Brennan and Frost would be running Overwatch, protecting their teammates with the skills I had helped them refine. Maddox would be making the tactical decisions that kept everyone alive. Drummond, Kane, Rodriguez, all of them doing the dangerous work that never ended. And here I was doing different work that mattered just as much. Creating the next generation of iron wolves who would hunt in silence and never miss when it counted. I thought of Jamie one last time. My brother who had died because someone wasn't good enough when it mattered. This was how I honored his memory, not through my own excellence alone, but by ensuring hundreds of teams would have the support they needed when everything went wrong. The warrior had become the teacher, and the pack I created would be unstoppable. I turned from the window and prepared for tomorrow. 24 candidates waited to learn whether they had what it took to hunt in silence. Most would fail, a few would succeed, and those few would change everything.